Hello everyone, welcome, my name is Phoenix and this is the Consumer's Guide to Video Games. Look Outside, 2025, Francis Columbi. I think that's how you say his name, I'm not going to take a second pass at it. Moving on. Look Outside is a turn-based RPG survival horror game. Taking control of an unnamed man, this average Joe wakes up one morning to find that going outside is hazardous for your health. This development has caused most everyone in his apartment complex to turn into freakish monsters. With little help and no knowledge of how this came to be, we, as this nameless person, must find out what happened to the outside world and how to stop it. This was a recommendation from my podcast co-host Kara, and she hits another home run with her fucking Rex. This was an incredibly creative and atmospheric horror title. A blend of multiple genres, Look Outside is a cross between a game like Earthbound and a game like the original Clock Tower, or a game like Alone in the Dark. The game plays like your typical old-school turn-based RPG. You explore areas, you encounter random enemies, you get loot, you solve puzzles and interact with people, all that sort of stuff. However, the game's survival horror bent means that combat is a thing not to be trifled with. If you enter combat, you better be fucking ready. Combat in this game will kick your ass and houses many subtle intricacies. Knowing what armor to wear, knowing what weapons to use, and knowing who to take with you, and what they're all equipped with, is the difference between kicking these monsters' asses or getting turned into mincemeat. One of the more interesting elements to the RPG mechanics is having to maintain your health like a normal human being. You have to shower, brush your teeth, and eat, and keep yourself entertained in productive manners. If you don't do these things, you will get plagued with debuffs. It adds another layer of intricacy to the mechanics, as you always have to keep an eye out for cooking materials and toiletries and video games in order to keep in tip-top shape. I will touch on it later, but this mechanic also plays into the themes of this character being isolated from the world. Where the game really takes its cues from the survival horror world is in the level design. Taking place in a 3-story apartment complex with a basement and parking garage, everything you need to complete the game fully is in this building. Puzzles don't hold your hand per se, as the solutions aren't readily apparent, but talking to the denizens of this building, at least the ones that survived this catastrophe, and even doing the dreaded act of dicking about, will give you hints as to where to go and what you should be doing. Graphically, this game was made with fucking RPG Maker. It's not exactly a complex set of tools, but the amount of detail and personality that Columbi was able to generate just with these basic tools and a small team was absolutely astounding. Character models, despite being top-down and simplistic, had tons of personality, and you could tell who they were and what they were all about just from that view. Of course, you get much more detail zooming in and entering like the combat, mechanics, but the amount he could get outside of that realm was impressive. Environments are complex and detailed despite being simplistic in how they are built mechanically. Even just blotting out some areas in a room in black and sprinkling some blue trails tells a story in and of itself. Artistically, Francis Columbi is taking heavy cues from the 80s body horror classics, as well as the works of horror writers like H.P. Lovecraft. The creature design in this game is so imaginative, and at times terrifying. One of the first set of monsters you encounter is a family that has been turned into these disgusting teeth creatures. One dude had like rows and rows of teeth growing out of his chest and neck, and there was this kid that turned into a tooth monster with tentacles. Again, that's just one of the early ones. There are weird abominations of all sorts just running around this apartment complex. A complex that is sprawling and unique on every floor. This is a world that came from a really twisted and creative mind, and I'm impressed. One of the best parts of the game was the music. Obviously inspired by the likes of John Carpenter, this score is 80s synths galore. The pieces run the gamut in tone, but always maintain a sense of both wonder and dread. The opening theme, the one you hear in the menu, sounds like you are entering this extra-dimensional world of epic and eerie proportions. The piece that plays in your apartment is relaxing and peaceful. When you get outside of your apartment, when things aren't in silence, you get treated to these staccato bass synth hits that sound like they were ripped out of The Thing or Prince of Darkness. One of my favorite pieces was this one where you entered this red-tinted room full of meat and the synths get super ethereal but sound like really ominous, like you've entered a psychedelic nightmare. There's no voice acting in the game, so you'll be reading this script throughout your playthrough, but you are still treated to a damn good script regardless. This game doesn't have a clear act structure and is sort of non-linear. You can push the story forward and discover the act structure by exploring the apartment building and meeting the characters, some of whom will join your team and help you fight the monsters. However, you can also just stay in your apartment, play video games, and do fuck all until the 2 in-game weeks it takes for this cataclysm to end passes. If you play the video games you have, you do get treated to some of the game's fun sense of humor. The Super Jumpman 3 bit, being like Takeshi's challenge, was fucking hilarious. But why would you stay in your apartment? This is the thematic bent of the game, and this is why I love the script. To me, while it might come off like a hacky interpretation, this main character is mentally ill. To what degree the events of the game are figments of the main character's imagination, I guess that's for you to decide, but this character has an anxiety disorder at best, or is schizophrenic at worst. He views going outside as dangerous. He views the people outside his door as monsters. He clearly doesn't want to be like this, as being lonely is a punishment for you mechanically, and going outside and helping to stop this is rewarding, but this main character's mind is broken. I got the ending known as No Turning Back. Just surviving the 15 days leaves you in a world ravaged by the cosmic entity that has invaded Earth. Society has crumbled and is barely rebuilding itself under the tyrannical foot of giant eldritch kaijus. You have nowhere to go, and your one friend Sybil, an eyeball that you talk to through your wall, is nowhere to be found. Your inaction and your inability to conquer your fears resulted in the end to the world. But I imagine if you do everything in the game, you will be able to get a better ending. Yeah, I'm thinking Kara still has a good track record with recommendations. Look Outside is an interesting, stylistic blend of RPG and survival horror. The game is challenging, and despite being a short experience, offers so much replayability. The writing is razor sharp, and the music is enveloping. What Francis Columbi was able to do with just RPG Maker as his development tool is astounding, and I look forward to seeing what this creative mind does with some actual money behind him. If you like horror games, this one is definitely a game to prioritize. Recommended. And I am feeling an 8.5 to a 9 out of 10 on this one. It might just be a 9 on replay. We'll see though. Catch you later, guys.